Hello, everyone. We are ready to get started today. Thanks so much for joining us. Today, we are talking about measuring your mobile experience, and specifically in this series of webinars where we dive into some of the basics of understanding your mobile experience, and especially in context with a full customer experience. Today, we're going to focus on user engagement and conversion. So before I pass the keys over to today's speaker, I wanted to cover a couple of housekeeping items. I am your webinar host, Amy. I am here at FullStory for all of our webinars, and we are recording. So after the webinar is complete, you will receive an email from us with a link to this recording and any other resources that we mentioned during the content today. Also, we will have time for questions at the end. So as you're listening to the program today, go ahead and type those questions in via the questions tab in GoToWebinar, and I will see those and we will bring them up to Kyle at the end. And then just as you're kind of trying to schedule your day this afternoon, we're expecting to run around 30 minutes today. So I want to make sure you can kind of get some value and then get on with your day. So now let's get started. First, I want to introduce our guest today, Kyle Henderson, Senior Product Manager for FullStory for mobile apps. And while he's kind of introducing himself, I'm going to go ahead and pass the presenting keys over.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, my pleasure to be here today to introduce everyone to measuring the mobile experience. What are some of the basics you should make sure you have in place, as well as being able to answer any of the questions you may have around some more advanced capabilities of native mobile experience measurement. Concerns around data collection, ease of data collection, analysis, privacy protections. We're going to be hitting all the hot topics, so excited to be here today. But more specifically, as I just said, we'll be hitting the Mobile Metrics 101. We'll also be looking at how to drive to the why behind those activities you're measuring, not just what happened, but why it happened. And we'll evaluate some of the trade-offs between different types of measurement and complexities of measurement in your analytics capture, your app performance, your privacy protection. So those are our top topics today. And to get started, let's hit the 101. So understanding engagement and conversion. Now, a little bit of backstory, a little bit of landscape. Mobile has evolved quite a bit in the last 10, 15 years, from the on-the-go access to the internet to the always-on. We're seeing volumes of internet traffic for shopping coming from mobile devices that's greater than we've ever seen before. More than 50% of internet traffic for shopping is on mobile device, and 40% of all e-commerce purchases in 2018 holiday season were on e-commerce. 80% of shoppers are using mobile devices inside the store as well. So these mobile devices are always on, they're always accessing the digital experience you're providing to get to the value for the consumer. And 40% of Black Friday sales, traditionally that brick and mortar kind of situation, are coming from mobile devices now as well. And in situations where there's a negative user experience on a mobile app, that has led 40% of users to go to the competitor. So mobile is a battleground quite often for many companies and their competitors nowadays. And 84% of people are still expressing that they're having a difficult time completing their mobile transactions. So there is quite a bit of room for improvement. But with that in mind, let's first talk about the categories of measurement. And today we're going to focus on engagement measurement, which is very much about understanding how users are coming to your app, what they're doing inside the app, and the quality of that experience inside the app. And the next category is going to be conversions. And this is related to engagement, but really focuses on where the rubber meets the road of an experience to the commercial and financial side of your business. How does that engagement turn into actual revenue? And the focus on converting users and or visitors into customers. Additionally, underlying engagement and conversion is also the performance of your app. So how can we understand your app's responsiveness, your app's stability, and the effect it has on both conversions and engagement and the digital experience overall? So on the topic of engagement measurement, there are a number of key metrics that you want to make sure you have in place if you're getting started with native mobile, or if you've been a native mobile for a while but maybe kind of living in a black box to a certain extent. These are the metrics you will certainly want to have in place. User volume, how many people are using your app? And also session volume, not just the number of people, but how many, and I take a term from the web, how many visits are there to your app? How many times are people opening your app and how often? Also, getting a sense of the measured, quantified experience. So some basics and industry standards around this are customer satisfaction surveys, net promoter score surveys. How happy are they with the digital experience? Also, you'll want to understand your user acquisition channels. What are the sources that have provided you new users of your app that led to installs? And how do I segment even the 3 stats above, CSAT, session, and user volume, into these channels, these sources of users, how they found us? Additionally, contacting support or leaving feedback is a very, very valuable data set to be collecting. Often it ends up being free-form text or potentially voice-to-voice communication, but there are a number of technologies nowadays that allow you to aggregate keywords and understand the emotion and sentiment behind much of that content to have a much more measured approach to understanding the trends inside this feedback and support channel. Now, what do they have to say and what was the quality of what they said? So that wraps it up for engagement, but now focusing on conversion inside your digital app experience, and also understanding conversion in your digital apps is not just inside the playground of your app. Your app often could be the starting place for a conversion or the ending place for a conversion. There's cross-device journeys that happen every day. But what we really want to understand around conversion and getting the basics in place is the user lifetime value. You know, once you've acquired a user and turned them into a customer, what is your expected value to gain from that user? This is a very valuable metric to develop. Also, when you're making considerations about opening up or investing in new channels to bring you users, you want to understand the rate at which you convert them into customers so that you know that acquisition cost. And speaking of the acquisition cost, that's the next major metric. So once I understand the lifetime value and I understand the sources, I want to make sure, am I paying less to acquire them than the value they deliver over time? Is that investment and acquisition going to pay off over time? What did we spend to get them here? And are we getting more value out of it? Also, what's the average order or conversion value? How are we evaluating what that conversion's worth? That conversion could be a purchase. It's very straightforward. You know, I bought a new pair of socks and they cost $15, so that's the value. But there could be conversions that are less purchase oriented. It could be about lead collection in some way. There are quite a few funnels out there that the focus of the conversion is, did I acquire a new user? Did I acquire a new contact in some way? And you may also want to attribute value even to those by looking at your larger funnel and attributing, you know, if I have 1,000 users come in and download the app and I convert 100 of them to customers, you know, on average, how much value do I attribute to the average order? How much value do I attribute to getting that user as well? Also, straight up your total conversions, you know, how many people are spending money? What is my conversion rate? And being able to have the baseline conversion rates will allow you to get much more segmented and targeted later in understanding more unique or less traveled journeys that are still valuable, and understanding the conversion rate and what might drive the conversion rates up or down on those more targeted journeys. Funnels. This is about that journey story. How efficient is your experience? Where are you losing people along the way? And this also gives you a lot of guidance quite often into both what the source of your users to then become customers are, as well as the quality of experience and what is the match between those. Often when acquiring a user, you're making some kind of value promise to them, and you're learning if you actually deliver on that value promise by seeing the conversion. And funnels really help you understand the layers of that value promise. Will you move from point one to point two to point three in the value promise? Meaning, are you interested in this item? Are you willing to say, I'll buy this item by putting your card? Will you actually purchase the item? It's a wonderful way of understanding the efficiency of your experience. Now, moving on to our third category of measurement, performance. Now, performance is an underlying factor that powers the other two categories and anything around the digital experience and how that represents your brand. You don't want your application response time to reach a point where it feels laggy. It feels like it's not snappy and quick, whether from the impact it has on your conversions or the impact it has on the lifetime value or the expected lifespan of that user with your app. You also may not want to get the brand impression that you have a slow, laggy experience around your brand. So application response time may seem very technical, but it has a deep psychological effect on the brand and on the quality of the app. Screen rendering times as well. So not just the response time of someone taps on the screen and the app changes, does it feel like it responds immediately? But the rendering times also play into that. How quickly is the interface drawn to the screen as well? This also falls in that category of how fast. You also want to understand the memory processing and therefore the battery utilization and data utilization of your app. How efficient are you at delivering that brand experience, at delivering on that value promise? Because often, and I've done it myself, I will uninstall apps because I see, oh, it's got memory bloat, or I see it's checking in on location all the time behind the scenes, which is causing me to drain battery life. The performance of your app will have an impact on who wants to keep your app installed. Additionally, crashes, right? No one wants to be using an app, engaging with the brand, evaluating that product promise, that brand promise, and have it just crash on you. That's like, imagine if I went to the store and I saw a sales associate freeze in front of me and they can't help me anymore. That just leaves a very bad taste in the user's mouth and should be avoided. You don't want these app crashes to be happening. So what is the stability of your app and how consistently are you not crashing or crashing, and in what situations? These are all measurements you'll want to have in place. Now, there are a lot of challenges today around measuring app user experiences, and I've tried to categorize them here for you as well. There are ethical implications around measuring app UX. Some of the latest Apple commercials out there are, shooting out the line to the public that says there's more sensitive and private and personal information on your mobile device than in your entire home. So the consideration around what information you need to be able to drive business value and deliver the best experience for your end users and customers should be top of mind at all times nowadays when designing and developing your app measurement strategy. You also want to make sure that the way you're measuring and the tools you're using to measure, the platforms, are actionable. It's one thing just to get a pile of data, and it's another thing to have a platform and tool set that processes that data and turns it into actionable insights, whether it's to-do lists of here are the performance impacts you should address, or here are your top reported issues and bugs from a support perspective or a user feedback perspective. Here are the drop-offs in terms of your specific measurements in your funnels. The actionability of the data you collect is key to being able to iterate and improve faster, especially in these landscapes today where the competition around app experience is heating up and helping the winners win more and the losers are falling off at the end of the market trends. So cross device as well. Journeys are not just on a single device anymore. Uh, all the devices are turning into kind of an almost nearly always on experience. There's a lot of screen time, and you are going to want to understand, did someone initially research products while in store on a mobile device and go home and later do the purchase on their desktop once they're in their cart, or vice versa? You're going to want to be able to stitch together all these touch points that the user has with your brand experience and your digital experience across the devices they use. Another challenge is tag blindness. For many years in the native mobile space, it has been difficult to set up instrumentation to collect the data you want because it's all been very tag driven. You have to go and instrument the specific events you want reported back. And that means you're going to have to know the questions you want to ask ahead of being able to get the answers. But that doesn't have to be the case anymore. You can go about approaches where you collect everything and are able to retroactively look back once new questions emerge. So tag blindness is something that can be overcome nowadays as well. Bloat. Everyone is interested in having the fastest download of the app to the phone, and limiting the number of third-party SDKs or libraries being utilized in an app is a big way of limiting the size of those app packages, those IPAs or APKs. And it's an industry challenge across the board because it's always this trade-off between how do I impact the download rates by increasing my package size by a megabyte in exchange for being able to get potentially a deeper insight. And the last one is personalization. And I say this from the perspective of kind of an elevator ride. It's one thing to get aggregate analytics, some basic analytics, say from an app store who's telling you about the number of downloads, telling you about the engagement rates across maybe an A/B test or a limited release of a new version of an app. That's kind of high level metrics. But nowadays, the level of personalization and kind of customization of experiences can be done at the individual user level. And so that means you also need metrics and measurement that can go down to the individual user level as well, but also be responsible in those ethical situations. So being able to measure the impact of personalization is a challenge for app developers and businesses today as well. Now, how do you get from what to why? Well, revealing the why behind those potentially bad experiences is unlocked by some additional capabilities, more advanced measurements and insight collection than you may have today, or potentially even out of the box with solutions off the shelf. But some of those capabilities you're going to want to undertake is cohort segmentation. I'm going to want to understand how different audiences are engaging with my app and affecting my KPIs, or even just the KPIs inside that audience. And maybe you're going to separate that cohort based upon the source of acquiring those users. Maybe you're able to understand a bit more about profiling the user as well. So maybe you have different groups of users. Maybe you're a B2B to C company in some way, and you're going to want to measure both the business side users as well as the end consumers, and you're going to want to do cohort segmentation against that. Anytime you're asking a question around audience, that's really where this deeper segmentation becomes very, very valuable to detailing the why, because you understand more about the biases and needs of that audience. Also, that cross-device source and exit. This is the more detailed measurement around those much more complex journey pathways across devices, and wanting to be able to do the segmentation when you have situations such as started on desktop and in app and vice versa. And those journey paths could actually take you back and forth multiple times. So it's one thing to say I want to compare my KPIs between people who start on desktop versus people who start on native mobile. And it's another thing to say, no, I want some kind of Sankey chart about understanding how all of my pathways fork many, many times based upon my user volume in all of these permutations of the journey as well, and understanding which paths are the most trod paths, which are the least tread paths, which paths deliver the most conversion value relative to their volume of users going through the path. All these really, really unique insights that can start to tell the story of why. Also, the session replay, and this comes down to the personalization a little bit that I was mentioning before, as well as being able to learn in more detail how the cohort above the journey path they may be journeying down plays out in real life, and get that kind of be there with the user to better empathize with their experience. Session replay is the ability to say, this specific session, I want to reanimate it in some way so I understand exactly what the user experience was. I can see what they're tapping on the screen. I can see how they're navigating through different screens. And that gives me a closer to the real experience the user had to build that empathy and generate new insights and provide more color around the why. Friction heuristics. This is a kind of a special space in which you're looking for certain patterns of behavior and activity. And this could be patterns in the specific UX interactions with different screens and different elements. It could be, here at FullStory, we have our branded rage click and rage tap experiences where we're looking for a very specific interaction heuristic that signals that this person was upset. So this ability to surface heuristics that are oriented towards friction and potentially also oriented towards success. It doesn't just have to be friction, but this idea that it's very specific patterns of behavior are defined experiences that could be automatically surfaced and checked up on and measured. That's the power of getting the why behind heuristics. Additionally, associating support requests, clustering support requests. I made mention to this earlier, but there's a whole lot of additional power and technology around dealing with those transcripts or dealing with those open text replies and conversations that go back and forth to understand trends and understand sentiment as well. All very valuable for understanding the why by just giving more and more detail and more segmentation around the experiences in an auto magic sort of way. Now, how to marry the what and the why is a constant iterative process, and it has an effect on your customer's experience. This cycle on the right of find and measure to then understand with some of those more advanced capabilities to build the story of the why and then take action. The faster and faster you can run this cycle, the more iterations you get to the optimal situation and the outpacing you might do of a competitor depending on your offering, your value promise, your product promise. But the faster you can make this go, the better you can be today. Now in FullStory, we try to assist with that process by providing you specifically for native mobile experiences or the cross-device journey experiences, the ability to quickly find and measure. How do you, in less than 10 seconds, say, I want to find individuals who started on desktop, ended in native mobile, had seen that these specific screens on either platform, had ended up converting in some way, and may have encountered this bug we know. You could go tap, 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 and measure the scope of that experience instantaneously with FullStory, and then understand the impact as well, whether against your conversion rate, against user trends, et cetera, et cetera. So the ability to kind of measure on the fly with our tagless analytics platform behind the scenes is very powerful. Additionally, once you have been able to understand a specific detailed digital experience journey, you can then dive deeper into the why that may have happened or what are the fine details and nuance is that could be optimized in that experience with session replay. Seeing really is believing. The ability to generate a metric around what the actual conversion rate is for a very targeted audience around a very targeted journey path, and be able to watch several replays and say, I'm seeing people again and again have this point of confusion or this point of friction. I'm now going to fire up an experiment and a hypothesis to solve it. Very powerful with session replay. Additionally, we provide a suite of tools around debugging the digital experience. We know that there are um, some friction which has to do with perception and understanding and alignment between the digital experience you designed and the end user's expectations. But we also know that sometimes those may be well matched, but there is a technical bug or snafu that will be affecting the perfect experience. So part of what FullStory for native mobile and mobile apps offers is the connection between understanding those digital experiences from the qualitative side and also being able to connect those directly to technical friction that might be introduced by errors, by crashes, being able to associate those with the specific log messages that happen in those individual sessions, doing integrations with all of your performance monitoring features and tool sets on other platforms like Crashlytics, for example, being able to stitch all this together so that you really understand how the performance of your app is also affecting the digital experience is a quick way to get to improved levels of winning in your digital experience. Now I want to comment and give a little information on balancing the trade-offs. So we've talked about kind of a few different levels of sophistication, a few different groupings of capabilities around understanding the digital experience of a mobile app. Now, for some of your like most basic mobile analytics, this may be coming from the app stores themselves or a very high level kind of KPI driven approach to getting your native mobile metrics. Some of the basic metrics I was listing before. Often the performance impact of these types of solutions, it can vary depending on what you're measuring. Typically they're more on the lighter side, but the data you collect is much higher level. So it's usually not that big a performance impact. In terms of insight, it's very helpful for understanding the big picture, but you really don't have any detail when it starts to get to more complex journeys, more complex paths, individual user experiences. But because this is such a high level set of metrics, there's rarely any impact in terms of a privacy concern because you're just kind of aggregating basic events. Now, one of the tool sets that's been available in market for quite a while, whether it's happening in user testing labs or in capabilities that you might be able to bake directly into your app, is screen recording. And if you're baking it directly in your app, typically this has a very heavy impact on the performance of your app. It can only be used in certain situations quite often with a Wi-Fi connection. It can potentially also have quite a bit of privacy implication because it's very difficult sometimes to target or guarantee that there won't be anything sensitive on the screen that is being screenshot or recorded to video at that time. Also, it tends to be very qualitative. You may end up having a mountain of videos to watch and not an easy way of filtering down to what you specifically need to watch. So while there is some value in this, there's also some negative sides to going the screen recording route. Now, when we want to talk about tagless analytics, this is something that's newer to the space for native mobile. In the past, the approach has been very much lay down tags, identify specific events, report those back, go through a management process where you may be having to keep track of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different tagged events to be able to get the inputs you want. Now, the good thing about this approach is the performance impact is very minimal, and it can give you the customized insights you want because you have deeply customized it. But the downside is you had to deeply customize it, manage it, and it's never really retroactive. You don't have the raw data in the sense to be able to tag past events. Maybe with a Herculean effort to go back and go through past logs, you might be able to put some things together, but it's going to be a lot of effort for an unknown impact or even unknown success rate on whether it can be done. Now, the potential privacy issues is really dependent on how you set this up as well, because tagless analytics can be collecting different types of data. Now, here at FullStory, we're able to customize the data we collect from native mobile apps into 3 groups. Did an element or an event exist and happen? What was the user interaction with that event that we were able to measure and understand, and then what was the content inside that element or event. So was there PII or sensitive information? With FullStory, we can target specifically which of those groups leave the device, but still provide you the rich visualization so you can understand the session replay and get to the why about what's happening. Now, tagless analytics, and I've kind of bleeded into our fourth row here. One of their benefits as well is it's also a great resource and value to data science teams, an up and coming and high potential space of development for many companies. Now, for FullStory, we specifically have put an amazing amount of effort into making sure there was no impact on the user experience or performance of your app with our offering. And our offering is a combination of tagless analytics and a session replay capability that's driven by tagless analytics for native mobile. So you're able to retroactively measure everything you need. Plus, we've added in layers and layers and layers of new privacy capabilities specifically for native mobile that, one, puts you in a default state where you're never capturing PII or sensitive information, and two, allows you to do deep configuration on what content you want collected from the app experience. And that can be sensitive to geographies, it can be sensitive to levels of permission the user has given you, an amazing amount of customization that requires almost no effort in the code to be able to do as well. It all can be managed inside the interface of FullStory. It also allows you to answer pretty much any question you may have about your mobile experience in deep detail from a measured perspective, as well as deeply understanding and empathizing with the user's experience. Now, a little bit about how our solution works is fundamentally here at FullStory, what we're doing is we're scanning and logging and indexing all of the events that draw the elements to the screen, all of the user interactions, and any of the log messaging and device performance level information that we could capture. We're bundling these up into payloads and sending them back to our platform about every 30 seconds to a minute or so. This allows us to have very little impact on the performance. So in that app responsiveness, we never run on the main UI thread. It allows your app to be just as snappy as it was before. And it also allows us to capture a low level of volume of data that allows us to pre-process all of that into the events so that you didn't have to tag it in advance. This frame first approach also is very impactful in terms of being able to get a rich experience that can be connected back to other platforms and integrations such as Crashlytics, Bugstags, whatever it is you're doing. There's use cases around connecting it to support so that if you're using Zendesk, you have connected links to be able to watch the replay of the user as they led up to giving that support ticket, or of the user leading up to that crash. All of the APIs we provide for web, we have a matching API for native mobile as well. I also want to give you a sense of where this privacy protection goes once it's visualized in the session replay. So this is the full spectrum of where you can go. Now, by default, we are in this mask state, and it actually is a client-side masking. It looks like CIA redaction bars, but what's really happening is we were sent information about the element existence, the user interaction, but none of the content. But that element information told us the styling of it, told us the location on the screen, et cetera, et cetera. So text, we were visualizing in the appropriate line breaks and the right color and the right font height. Images, we visualized by looking at the dominant pixel color and then generating a placeholder that can be used. But since we understand the drawing of those elements to the screen and we understand the user interaction, we can still aggregate it all into metrics, and we can still animate the replays for you. So you should still have all of the business value you would have gotten, but without any of the risk of collecting PII or sensitive information. And on the other side, you could go an unmasked route. Maybe there's nothing sensitive in your app. You can unmask everything and do this very easily, not in code, even though you could do that if you want, but you can do this in admin settings of FullStory. So with that, you're able to see the experience as it was on the screen. But the most powerful situation, and the situation most of our native mobile customers put themselves into, is this powerful situation of partially unmasked, partially masked, based upon different rules. Maybe in Europe, you want to go heavy with the masking on the client side. Maybe in North America, you feel a little more comfortable collecting some information, except maybe not in California. You can target at that geography level as well. You can also target based upon rules around the users or versions of your app. As you release new capabilities and features in your app, there might be a new section that has sensitive information that you didn't have privacy rules with before. You can go the full spectrum with FullStory and customize it specifically to your privacy protecting needs. Now, Amy, I think it's time for some questions, and I'm happy to hop in and provide answers where I can.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's see. So I've got a couple questions here. First question, is FullStory able to stitch together a user journey that goes back and forth between web and native mobile?
The answer is yes. We have an API called FS Identify that allows you to pass us information that you can use to identify the user on both web and in native mobile apps. Once we're able to connect the session using that API to the real person, you can then set up funnels and set up measurement and dive into the individual user profile if you want to see how your audiences or the individual user moves back and forth between the devices to engage with your digital experience.
Awesome. Okay, next question. This is a good one. So this question is this considered screen recording in the sense that Apple thinks of screen recording? So do we need to get user consent for screen recording to use FullStory for mobile apps?
This is not screen recording. This is not screenshotting. We don't touch that with a 10-foot pole because of the privacy concerns. And in fact, we even try to provide those additional privacy capabilities so that the data you do collect, you can be very specific in what data you do collect. So from the perspective of concern around capturing too much or being too heavy on the app, we don't do any of that at FullStory. There is no screen recording with our option.
Perfect. Okay, we've got another question here. Do you support hybrid mobile apps, for example, Ionic apps?
We do. We have support for 100% native apps. We have support for hybrid apps. We have support for Ionic Cordova, and we also have support for React Native.
Awesome, thanks. Let's see, do you only pass metadata and basically reconstruct the screen on your end?
I think in concept that's a fair characterization, but to give some more of the details, we are effectively scanning the view hierarchy a few times every second. We are then serializing the changes of what elements are on that screen. We're collecting the user interaction, we're collecting log information, performance information, and packaging up the payloads. So it's metadata in the sense that it's more like analytics information, but it is a little bit more targeted and detailed to the specific session than, say, just kind of a high-level event that would be reported by a tag-oriented platform. So I think we collect more than metadata, but you can think of everything as what we do as being very event analytics driven, and events you don't have to define in advance.
Okay, got it. And so then another question here. So can you effectively track across native through responsive web views?
Yes, we have the ability to also capture session information and interaction and tagless event data in the web views. We do something kind of special here. We actually take our FullStory JavaScript snippet and we inject it into the web view to capture that session separately. But behind the scenes, when we process everything, we actually stitch that information back into our native mobile session, so it appears to be seamless to our users and our customers.
Awesome. All right, I think we got to all of the questions. If you have a question and you didn't get a chance to answer it, to ask it or get an answer, you can respond directly to the follow-up email that we send with the recording of the webinar, and we will make sure that your questions get answered. Kyle, thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to the next webinar in our series, which will be coming up in a few weeks, and you guys will hear more about that from us soon. All right, thanks everybody. See you next time.
Thank you.